Hey everyone, Karen the Warped Spinster here. Welcome to my channel. I'm glad you're spending some time with me today. It's nice to have friends with me. This is probably going to be a short video today because that's just the way my life is right now. When last we spoke, we were looking at various ways to applique circles onto a background fabric, and just as practice and testing things out for doing a quilt that's made up of basically just circles of different sizes and colors, etc. And this is how we left it. And I still need to do a back stitch on this one. This one is fused on, and so I want to do a stitch around the outside. I've got a scrap of stabilizer here that I can use. I'm not sure what stitch. I've done a couple with the zigzag. I've done a couple of just straight stitch raw edge here, and I've done a hand applique, which is still my favorite. But I will do some sort of decorative stitch around here just to see how it works related to this. Do I like this better? Do I like this better? Are there different circumstances where I might like one over the other? So, pardon me while I zoom in here. You can see that just a plain zigzag acts as a decorative stitch around there. So I want to do a stitch around here. This one I've left unstitched because I want to try something else on here. And then I want to talk about some embellishments that I might make. But we'll talk about that later. To start off with, I'm going to do some decorative stitch around here. You will be as surprised as I am when you find out what it is. I have no idea what I'm doing yet. I'm going to attempt to do a little bit of this while I have a camera in my face between me and the machine. We'll see how it goes. I have chosen a decorative stitch that we've not used before in videos, and like many decorative stitches, it's intended to be in a straight line rather than going around a curve. This one I did a little test piece on, and it seems to work fine. The stitches are get a little bit distorted, but not bad. I might tighten them up one step so that they're a little closer together, but it handles the curve pretty well. So what I'm doing is turning it evenly as I stitch. So my hand is moving this way, so I'm consistent in how I'm turning it, how far and how fast. And my aim is to keep this, there's a center red line here on this foot that I have. And I'm just watching that and keeping it on this edge. And that will help me to keep it even, and the turning slowly and evenly is to keep the stitch looking even and consistent as it goes around. So let me try doing a little bit of that here when I can't really see very well. We'll see how it goes. You can see that I'm not stitching very quickly, and I'm not a fast stitcher to begin with, but when I'm doing this and I want to really keep it focused, then I'm quite slow. This could be interesting because I have changed that stitch density in the middle, and we'll be able to see what a difference that might make. So I started out with it at this density, and I stepped it down one, so we'll see how that looks when I'm finished. All right, a design lesson here. We've talked about this before. If you remember, if you've been watching my videos a while, you might remember this piece, which has lots of circles, and we explored some applique here as well. And these circles were farther apart, and some of them, well, most of them are larger than what we have. So when I did these stitches, I try to choose stitches that have a more modern look to them rather than flowers and vines kinds of things, just for my personal taste. But these have the motifs of the stitch overall are quite close together. They're quite small and they're quite close together. So that's a zigzag somewhere. I think I have a, this one is again quite close together. Now, I don't remember if this happened here, but if it didn't quite meet here, because if you have a longer, I should say, stitch, then you're going to run in potentially to this problem, which I knew was going to happen. The motif can't finish out before it gets to the start of the whole thing. So the start and the finish do not come together well. And white on yellow is maybe not the best choice here. And it has some, I do also have a size 14 needle in there, which I didn't change out. So lots of lessons here. Make sure you have a needle that's appropriate and that is sharp. I've got a 14 that's been going through 4 layers of fusible adhesive. So I will change out my needle after this. But you can see that it just doesn't meet well there. So I don't know whether or not that happened here. But if it did, there's less chance it would have been as noticeable because these are closer together. But they're not right next to each other, so potentially they could end up one right next to it or just not spread evenly. So in this case, I wanted to put this, I wonder if I even did that. Yes, I did before I put this on. So I have this strip that could cover up any of the strangeness of the beginning to the end. Most of the others, other than this other ball fringe one, are zigzags for that very reason, or a cross stitch, which is pretty much the same thing. So in this case, I might, in fact, do, say, because you know me in black and white strips, I might, in fact, at some point be putting something across on this particular piece. This is just a practice to see what I want to do and learn some lessons before I start on the actual piece, which will be all circles. But in this case, I could still make this a decent piece by putting a strip across there in some fashion. I don't know, probably not that wide. If I wanted to keep it all circles, then I've got a small circle here I could just plant over that. So we're putting a Band-Aid on it, basically. And it's a design feature. It's not a bug. So I had, of course, 3 choices. One is to choose to not do this stitch at all. Second would be to find out when this is going to happen, to go back and rip all that out, which is really a pain and is going to ravel all of these edges. Or I could plunk that down in the middle and not necessarily that color. Do I need to? No, I think I'm all right. I've got a pretty limited colorway here. So I might do something like that. Now, I don't want to do that on the piece I'm practicing for because that's all circles. I'll try to remember to put a photo up here of the sort of thing that I'm aiming for. All right, so that's a lesson learned on that one. In fact, I'm going to peel that back and plunk it down on there. This is Steam-A-Seam 2, so it's repositionable before I fuse it, and I haven't fused it yet on either side, actually. So let me just stick it down there so we'll have a little Band-Aid over our boo-boo. All right, so just imagine we can stitch that. Now, this one I've left unstitched because, and it's not fused down. And it's not fused because I want to explore putting a second layer on here. Now this piece is not fused. I didn't do anything with it. I haven't stitched it down. I purposely didn't fuse it because I want to try putting another circle on top of it. And not as a Band-Aid, but as a true design feature. So I would choose a color. Maybe I'll do something that really contrasts with that. So I could do a pink, but I've got a lot of pink going on, got a lot of green going on here. So I might end up doing a swath of pinkish and orangish, and then green largely. Have circles that way. We'll see. But I will try a pink one, or maybe it will be a piece of this in there. I could choose something fairly pink. You can see I've been fussy cutting out these circular pieces to put in there, and that actually might be kind of interesting, or something that would almost kind of bleed into it. Could give that a try. Or I could do a half circle in there. Interesting. I don't know what I would do with that half circle, but it might be. All right, I'm going to cut sort of a half circle here and see how we might play with it, and then I can do another circle that is a circle and try that. So I'm going to cut those off camera because y'all know how to cut. So I cut this roughly semicircular shape, which is pretty close to that design, which I could, well, that's not too bad. Take the pin out for the moment. Might do something like that. Is interesting, a sunset kind of design. I don't know that I necessarily want it to be. I just need more of this fabric, to be honest. I'll have to look on Etsy and see if anybody has any. Or I could make it pretty cattywampus to vertical and horizontal. I actually like that. And I'm, considering what I plan to do later, this might be the perfect thing. Now I'm going to have to start looking for certain kinds of fabric. So I'll go over that in a minute, but that looks good. Now in the process, I was going to come back and cut out something that was orange and pink, do an orange and pink circle, and I thought, well, I'll come down here, but this is just awesome on its own, isn't it? With that cut out. I do have one that has complete petals up here, which I think would make an awesome piece too. I really need more of this fabric. I really, really do. All right, so let me talk for a minute about what else I think I want to do with this to try it out. Again, I may or may not want to do this on my final piece that I'm practicing for, but I am taking a class, which is one of the reasons I'm short on time to do this, making a Poppins bag, and it's a pattern from Two Aunties Design. And I'm using some of, zoom out here, I'm using some of my own fabric on it, and the inside of the bag, the lining is also my design. And then these two pieces actually are Tula Pinks, and this piece. For the usual pattern, the sample on the pattern, and in the class samples, this is the front of the bag, and this starts over to the sides then. So this is like the front of the bag, and this is just the same fabric with an accent pocket in the middle. I decided to kind of switch it up, and I made the center panel a different fabric, and then I wanted to do something for the pockets. There was going to be too much going on if I had this stripe with the channel stitching on it, and then something else on the pocket, some other design. And I thought about this, but that was just getting to be too much. So I thought black was a good choice. And in fact, I kind of did that on the front. Sorry, we're getting off on a tangent here. So I wanted to continue this, but this just was never going to match up to suit me. I mean, I've got the horizontals okay. It's not those are skewed, but the pattern wasn't going to match up, and it's a large enough design. It was probably going to bug me that I couldn't match them up like you would, match up a plaid. I had plenty of fabric, but it just wasn't going to work by the time I got seams in there. So I decided that because I have black here, and you know me in black and white, so I did a border on the pocket of black and then a little accent on the top. So that's a pocket. But for this, I wanted something a little different and circular because I'm circles. So I did some hand applique circles here. These two are padded. This one is not. And I started out wanting to do hand embroidered, just sort of spikes or rays coming out from here. And I tried it and it just didn't work in the end for what I wanted, partly because this is pretty large stitches, and that meant that I had to go through and stitch these down. This is on a bag and a pocket, so it's going to get shoved around a fair amount, and I didn't want these stitches to move. Now, if I were doing a wall hanging, which is probably how my other project is going to end up, it wouldn't matter. The stitches wouldn't have to be secured as much as I had to do them here. And I just preferred to not have that happening, and it looked, I don't know, didn't look right for this project. I tried it first with doing, the cross and then a piece in between, looked kind of like a snowflake. Didn't want that, and I didn't have this railroad effect across there. But it just didn't quite look right. Maybe it wasn't bold enough for this. I don't know what it was, but I ended up doing this cross hatching, which I like a lot. And then I just wanted to do some straight stitches here that I wouldn't have to secure the stitches themselves. This was one long stitch from here to here, and then I used stitches to secure that. Now I could have done evenly spaced stitches, of course, for that. And that's what I did down here, and I was okay with spaces in between these. So I used 1/4 inch tiger tape and laid it out and then just stitched according to that. And then it needed something more, so I put in some French knots. Now, I like the effect of this. And we did that a little bit on this piece when we did this machine stitched crossing across there. So it was kind of a combination of two things, I guess. And I really like this effect, and I would like to do that, to try that on this. And now that I've got this down here, I'm thinking, what if I had this and then sort of rays coming out here in hand embroidery in, I don't know what color, but maybe a green or maybe a yellow to tie into that and have the rays coming out. Or I could do it the opposite way and have the rays coming out this way as if it was a sunrise. And then I'm going to run into that. That's also a reason to pay attention to the stitches that you choose. If you're going to use decorative stitches around there, is this came pretty darn close to these green. And if I wanted these green to have decorative stitches on the edge, they might end up colliding with each other or overlapping each other. And in fact, I've fudged just a little bit. Hopefully you can't tell, but I shifted in just a little bit as I was going around there. So I think that might be nice. And I think I could do those ray stitches coming out from all of these pieces, or just some of those pieces if I don't want to be too floofy about it. If you remember, I did kind of a jerky decorative stitch, just spontaneous on this one, because this one's going to be kind of ragged jagged anyway, because I did the raw edge applique, purposely leaving that to ravel on the edges. So I'm thinking that might be what I want to do on here, is to secure those. And I didn't want to fuse them because I knew if I was doing hand stitching, I didn't want to have to stick through 2 layers of that adhesive stiffness. I just do not enjoy doing machine embroidery over fused stuff, and doing buttonhole around it or anything. It's just not my favorite thing. So I think I might do that. And because I don't want, I want the rays to be more the star of the show than these edges, I might stitch those with invisible thread. Say put some, might still do raw edge applique though. That's going to ravel. There's no fuse on there, so that's going to ravel. So I would need to do a pretty close zigzag stitch and just know that it's going to ravel some anyway, or do a straight stitch and know it's going to ravel, which would ravel equally with that, I guess. I think I might do that. I'll just do a straight stitch around. What color do I want to do it in? Not entirely sure. I might just do invisible. Load up the invisible thread, get those stitched down, and then I can think about what I want to do for rays coming out. And do I want them going that way, or do I want coming this direction? I can make an argument for both ways, but I think I'm going to do this and sort of mimic these pink stripes going out. Not necessarily in pink though. I think I will do it in yellow to tie these two together. So I will stitch these down, get some stabilizer under there, stitch those down, and then I also, I'm wondering, because black and white, you know, if I want to do a smaller circle, say something like this, it's going to look a little bit like Minnie Mouse, I guess, in black and white to put on top of this yellow, which is fading back into nothingness. Now, I'm not sure I want to I've got a little bit of black and white here. Not sure I want to introduce it into this. It might be too much, but I'm going to cut out a little bit of, maybe a little bigger than that though, at the inside of this. Try and sort of semi-center those dots, or choose a different print that doesn't have dots, because that might drive me a little bit over the edge. Yeah, I'll find a black and white print and cut a circle and see how that will look on here, and then I will do raw edge applique in invisible thread on that. All right, I thought as long as we're doing circles, we'll put circles in circles as we have here. We could call it circles squared or meta circles or something. And there's a black and white piece, which I don't dislike, but if I wanted to do that, I would need to do more black and white within the piece. One is just too much. Yuck. Not that. Sorry if you like that, but not for me. And then have rays coming out from here. Now, if I decide I don't want the black and white in there and want to just stay with this 3-color theme, 3 hues, then I could put a pink one in there. And that really is more in keeping with this as it is now, unless I started adding more black and white. Now, there's nothing that says that has to be in the center. I can offset it because asymmetry is kind of my jam. So that's a possibility. And as with all things, if I want it to be off center, I want it to be off center, not off center. If it's just a little bit off but noticeable, then people are going to think, wow, she missed it. And so I prefer to have it really off center if I'm going to off center it. And then again, I could have some rays coming off of that. Probably not for the final piece I'm going to do, but as I'm working more on this piece, because why waste my experiment if I don't have to, if I can make it into a piece I like. I don't, as you know, I don't require that happen. We're just exploring things here, but sometimes I can make a piece out of it, as I did with this one. Started out as just plain with circles, and it ended up finishing up as this is running in Hollywood circles. So I didn't stitch these down because I came back to talk to you about something else, and poof. All right, I'm going to stitch those down, and then I will go in search of some yellow thread for this, and maybe orange for this, maybe green for this. I'll bring some orange and some green, and we'll see. A couple things to remember as you're doing raw edge applique of the sort where you're doing straight stitches near the edge but not at the edge. Number one, the smaller the circle, the tighter the curve, of course. So a stitch is going to cover more ground, and it can end up looking very square-sided. So you can shorten your stitch. My normal stitch length is 2.5. I shortened it to a 2.0 for this one. Probably could have shortened this to a 2 or a 1.5 on here. Now, you want to be sure that's what you want to do before you do something with that short a stitch, because it will be a pain to take out, especially if it's invisible thread like this is. And the other thing is that the further away from the edge you stitch, the greater the chance that when you are quilting it, that is going to fold back on itself if it catches on the hopper foot or the presser foot. Hopping foot or the presser foot. So just be aware of that. I'm probably going to, if I finish this piece, and now I'm planning to, I will probably machine quilt it rather than long arm quilt it, just for the size, if nothing else. And I can be watching as I come up to a raw edge applique and to make sure that doesn't pull back, unless that's a look you want. All right, now I went ahead and appliqued these down with just raw edge invisible thread. And now, as I'm thinking about the rays coming out, here's a yellow thread. It's just a smallish size pearl cotton, and I could afford to cut a few pieces off here so we can get the effect. My snips could use some sharpening. Lots of things could use some sharpening. Here we have, and these would just start probably, well, not necessarily. They could start just about anywhere, would add to the fun, wouldn't it? And then have some rays out. I wouldn't even have to make them straight. It could end up looking like jellyfish or something, I guess. And I might do some French knots along those, maybe not. Then down here, ooh, I brought an orange, but just put some sunglasses on. I think that's a little too much for this. So here's a green though. Again, it's a pearl cotton, a little bit thicker than the yellow one. And I might use that. Let me find an end. There's an end. There are two ends. Yay. And maybe that's what I would use down here. Or I could use the yellow again to kind of tie it back into itself there. So that's a possibility. I could use the green here. I just had an end. It can't be that hard to find. Or I could mix the two of them. I think I like the yellow up there. I didn't find any pink in my embellishment drawers. Let me look in my needlepoint stash here. Oh yeah, I got pink. I have pinks up the gazoo. Let's pull out. Oh, we could do a a jazzy, sparkly braid like this. And a little bit of sparkle to the occasion. You probably can't see the sparkle very well, but that's a sparkly braid. Or I could do that down here. It's a little bit darker, so it would even contrast with that. All right. So, or I have some pearl cotton in here, which is even larger than the other pearl cottons. One should have a variety of scale, right? So I could use, that's kind of a dull pink though. I think I would need it brighter than that. So that's pretty good for that. I have various skeins of embroidery floss. That's a little light and dull for it yet. So this is probably, if I want to use pink, that's probably the best choice. So I've got got a silk lame braid, which is from Rainbow Gallery. And this is probably DMC, it's pearl cotton. I also have a wool yellow thread, but I like the pearl cotton better. It's got sheen to it, which I like. So those are my options, and I will play with those a little bit this week, and hopefully, depending how the world goes and my life goes, hopefully we'll have something to show you for that. I could do some also just coming out all around. I have to think about if I want to overlap other circles in the process, which my first thought was, no, I don't think so, but now I'm thinking, yes, maybe I do, to start to tie everything together. The color scheme and using just circles and kind of circles helps to make it a cohesive sort of look, but overlapping pieces might help with that too. So this starts to overlap. I still have some small pieces to put in yet. Some smaller circles, because I want to play with that a little more before I get to the final piece. That's one of the reasons that I'm doing this, not just to create another circle piece, but to see how I might make and fit in these smaller pieces. I'm liking the idea of doing this just cross on the smallest ones rather than trying to stitch around that, which would be a nightmare. Just doing a cross on those to hold them down. That one, I would probably fuse all of those just to keep them in place while I'm stitching, if nothing else. Those are probably going to ravel quite a bit. But it's all going to ravel quite a bit, and I'm okay with that. That's why I did that sort of stitching on it. And to see how that would look in the end if I do some of that, or maybe all of that on my final piece. It would certainly make it quicker to do than if I were hand appliquing them, or even doing zigzag all around them. We'll see what happens. I have to decide which percolated piece I want to do to begin with. Before we call it a day, there were 2 or 3 comments or sort of questions, suggestions that I wanted to address from last week. As always, thank you for your comments. I appreciate the conversation. Kathy S. had been thinking along with me some seed beads or something, and I just finished a knitted lace shawl for a friend, and these were the beads that I used. I would have them stand up so you weren't seeing the holes. You would actually see the rounded part of the bead, but that is a possibility. So my philosophy is either leave it plain and simple, leave it naked as it were, or just embellish the living daylights out of it. So this has now fallen into the embellish the living daylights out of it. She also thought some tiny buttons, which, yes, you can get some pretty tiny buttons, maybe just a little larger than that, but they have little miniature buttons. I might even have a couple of green ones down there, not sure. This one, this little tiny, get the beads off there. This little tiny one here is very close to where I did the stitching here, so I might try to lift that off and move it up a bit. And Kathy K suggested using a hole punch to make these small circles, which that's a great idea. My fear at my hole punches anyway wouldn't be sharp enough to do the fabric. You for sure would have to put it on, I don't know, you wouldn't necessarily have to do a fuse to it, but you would have to have, oh hi, a little bird just came to sit on the windowsill to say hello to me. I'm back now. Nature call is over. So I don't think you'd have to put it on a fusible web, but you would definitely have to have something behind it for, I don't know, the punch to grip somehow. The fabric is just too flimsy, I think, for it to make a clean cut, and you would have to have probably a brand new sharp punch, and my punches are not brand new or sharp. My hole punches, but it's a good thought. I mean, that's about the right size, so I may play around with that a little bit. Thank you for that suggestion. Hazel mentioned she made a piece that she used felt circles, like wool felt circles, which I think is a great idea too, and then you don't have to worry about the raveled edges. And it's kind of in the tradition of the penny rugs, and which is a great classic traditional look, and you could certainly make it more modern if you wanted to, or go with the folk art traditional kind of look at it. So that certainly would be a good idea for circles as well. I think that's it for this week. I was going to show you what my backyard looks like right now, but I don't think you really want to see it. I need to go up and mow the top 40 for 5 neighbors, and I'm trying to figure out how I can get my mower up there. It's going to be tricky. We shall see. So as long as I survive that experience, I will see you next week. Hope to see you next week here. Thanks for joining me today. Until next week, be well, be safe, be happy, be quilting. Peace out.